So something interesting happened on LBC. I think it was this morning. Actually, I'm not entirely sure what the date was. Let me just, yeah, it was yesterday, we'll say, where our friend Charlie Downs went on Cross Question with Ian Dale. So it's just a panel talk show, but the lineup was very interesting. So you have here Stephen Flynn, the SNP Westminster leader and insane wokist for the Scottish National Party. You had Dr. Luke Evans, who is the shadow health minister for the Conservatives. So he's a person whose political career is probably on short shrift, not through any fault of his own, I imagine. Rachel, I think it was Cunliffe. I think I couldn't hear it very well when he was pronouncing it, but she's the associate editor of the New Statesman. And then you have Charlie and Ian Dale moderating. And it was very interesting because they began starting, okay, well, how should the UK respond to Israel, as you can see? And, I mean, this comes in the wake of Britain, France and Canada threatening action over Gaza. Mm-hmm. I don't know what's going to happen. Whatever, everyone's upset about this. But the sort of woke Scottish nationalist starts going on as you'd expect. He's very anti-Israel. He's very pro-Palestine. The Conservative gives a really wishy-washy, mealy-mouthed sort of explanation of the situation, which you would expect from a Conservative. The New Statesman editor goes on about the Israeli government being far right, which is what you'd expect from the New Statesman. And Charlie gives an interesting response, where he just attacks the framing of the question entirely. Let's watch.
Charlie.
Well, first of all, Ian, thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here. The first thing I would say is this conflict in Gaza, I think, it embodies so many of the fundamental questions, certainly that we're asking in post-national Britain and Western Europe more generally, about where a state derives its legitimacy from, what constitutes a state, and what rights states have when it comes to acts of aggression and self-defense.
Good start.
Good start,
Very
yeah.
good start.
I saw this. He was on form.
Yeah, he then goes on, so, how much more do we want to be involved in this? And so you can see that rather than accepting the frame of course we're going to be involved in this, and the question is which side are we on? How do we come down to it? Charlie starts attacking the very premise.
Yeah, we should always be looking at questions of an international matter from what can Britain gain from this? What are our own interests in this that we can gain from, whether it be cultural or economic? It doesn't. We don't have to be like alongside America as world police.
No, I mean we're not an empire. It's not our business. That would be my response. But the point that they make is, of course, Israel was attacked on October the 7th by Hamas as a terrorist attack. Terrible thing. Yes, but we also have terror attacks happening at home. And this was quite spicy, and they didn't like this.
I think that we have a very real-world example of a disproportionate response in the other sense, and that's on British soil, the rape gangs. There has been no response. There has been no real justice on this topic.
I think to compare the two is ridiculous.
But listen, I don't think it is, because crimes of a similar nature have happened on British soil, as happened on October 7th.
Well,
and
we
we've not
might have a question on that, but I'm not going to go down that road on this. Stephen?
No, it's like, I'm not going down that road.
No, Ian wouldn't, though, because he's a bit of a coward when it comes to anything that's right and conservative. He pretends that he's a conservative, but actually he's been a moderate Liberal Democrat in the
100%.
Rory Stewart line ever since he got involved in politics. And one of the greatest things that we ever managed to achieve was not ensure that he wasn't elected for
he got
long.
kind of deselected, didn't he? Because
that's right.
A recording came out of Ian, I can't remember which constituents it was, but him just taking a big steaming dump on it, saying, I hate this place and it's terrible. Yeah. And suddenly he got deselected from running for the Conservatives. So the point is, you can see that Charlie is like, well, actually, if you think about the moral crime that has happened, say, British white English girls, well, it's not terribly dissimilar to what the Hamas attack did on October the 7th. And of course, the famous image of the Israeli woman being led along with the blood stains on her rear. Yeah, it's not terribly dissimilar at all. And then you think, well, what about Manchester Arena bombing, the London attacks, and various others? These are not terribly dissimilar.
Well, if you were going to go down that line, you would have to ask the question of, well, if you're going to compare the two, I would imagine that there's probably a lot more victims on our side in our situation because obviously it's only over the course of one day that you're comparing it to. At which point you say, what would be a proportional response?
Well, I think that I think the Israelis probably do have a greater number of victims on that, because 1,300 in a day is a lot.
Oh yeah, I was just comparing it to the day over the course of decades.
I agree. But it's not necessarily about weighing up body counts or anything. What it's about is saying, does the state have a responsibility to actually protect its citizens from hostile actors, communities?
And I think it's useful here for us all to learn that when we're now dealing with the press and dealing with the questions, is to now frame the answers. More recently, we've been trying to do this, but I think it's more successfully, is to take away their question and reframe it in the way that we want it to be responded to. And they're finding it deeply uncomfortable. We saw that with the way that Farage actually, on one of his better days, he actually managed to do that just after the election, when he talked about racism. And that's a very good point that we should now be looking and considering whenever we're on shows, whenever we're dealing in conversations with people, reframe it into the context of our country and the crimes and offences and difficulties that we're having.
Because, I mean, one example, for example, on the grooming gangs, it's something like 80% dual Pakistani nationals, right? So why aren't we sanctioning Pakistan? Why aren't we doing something about this? And you can see Ian's like, sort of like, starts puckering up and be like, not going down that road.
I mean, again, we're talking about Charlie Downs. What is the proportional response to an absolute atrocity like what happened to Charlene Downs?
Is she the one who was ground up into?
Yes. Yeah. Like, what's the proportional response to that? Because that was allowed to happen. That did not happen in a vacuum.
Yep. And so, as you can see, Ian's like, right, okay, I'm not going down that road because that's scary, and I would have to out myself as a Liberal Democrat. So I'm moving on. And so they try and bring it back to Israel, but Charlie's like, no. Actually, we can take the example of Israel acting in the interests of its own citizens and ask, why doesn't our government do that? This is amazing.
Is that we have already seen acts akin to the events of October 7th on British soil, whether that's the Manchester Arena attack or the rape gangs, as I've already talked about. And we've seen the way our government has responded to those things, which is don't look back in anger, which is let's not allow this to sort of dethrone the great ideological project of multiculturalism. And I think that fears of an October 7th style attack happening on British soil are not unfounded, given the fact that we have over 1 million illegal migrants in this country from we know not where, given that recently a plot was foiled by Iranian illegal migrants to commit a terrorist attack in this country. I think that it's, I don't know, it's something that's far more likely, far more possible than I think anybody is willing to admit. And so I think that...
What should Israel be doing?
Well, this is the point. But, it's just interesting, isn't it, how Israel is the only state in the modern world that's considered Western, that is permitted to be sort of explicitly nationalist. Because in Europe or in Britain, for example, if you say that you want a government that governs explicitly in the interests of the indigenous British population, you want one that is uncompromising in its commitment to British interests, you're called far right and you're called a racist and all the rest of it. And so I can't help but think that if...
I have no idea what you're on about.
I think it's a sickening comparison.
Yep. Genuinely, I don't mean to be rude, Charlie. I have no idea what you're on about, pal.
What part of it do you not understand?
The brilliant leader of the SNP.
Look, I'm not here to defend the British state by any means, but you try to tell me that, look here, a Conservative, and the double look there. I'm not here to defend the Tories or the Labour Party or Lib Dems or those who believe in the British state. But nobody can reasonably say to me that the members of Parliament in Westminster aren't interested in defending the territorial integrity and the values, whatever they are, of Britain. And I'm the Scottish nationalist sitting here telling you that. So that should maybe calm your jets a wee bit on that one.
So you see the uniparty firewall erect itself in real time.
There we go.
Yeah, precisely. Like, now, this guy, just to be clear, he's the leader of the SNP in Westminster.
Yes.
Obviously wants to be a leader of the SNP. The SNP's core goal, for anyone who doesn't know, Scottish Nationalist Party, who want independence from Britain. So you would think any excuse to attack the British state would be completely valid, completely useful, and he'd be like, yeah, no, good point. People in Scotland should think about that. The British state is not looking out for the British, but all of a sudden, whoa, hang on a second. No. I, the SNP guy, I don't want to defend the Tories and Britain, but I'm going to leap to the defence of the Tories and Britain against Charlie Downs coming from well outside of the paradigm and saying, well, hang on a second, why aren't they looking out for our interests? And, I mean, that was, I really appreciate Charlie's use of the terminology. Right?
Yes.
He inserted a bunch of terminology that went unnoticed for them. But the idea that the SNP guy can suddenly be like, well, hang on a second, you can't attack the British state for betraying the British people. Yeah, I think we can, actually. In fact, we've got plenty of problems, not that one, So, for example, I mean, what's going on with Chagos? What's going on with Gibraltar, in fact? Who owns the bloody railways? Well, we can just look, right? Between 1994 and 1997, these got privatised. Hong Kong, Italy, a company registered in the Cayman Islands, a Dutch state railway company.
Yep.
Like, you can see how our country is just being given away. And of course, are we talking about like the borders?
And all of those we could have actually used if we wanted to influence our so-called deal with the EU.
Of course,
we're going to nationalise
exactly.
these if you
give us what we want, or you lose all of this.
Absolutely.
We could have played hardball, and yet we didn't. Right?
Many countries would lose out a lot more than we would in terms of the trade now that we have with so-called Europe.
It's just
our investments.
We've got the most expensive railways in Europe, obviously, because we're being completely rinsed by the Europeans on our railways.
I mean, what's this? So Govia is owned by Go Ahead, an Australian bus company which goes through a Canadian pension fund that also gets infrastructure as well from Australia and Spain. The rest of it's owned by a French company.
The French railway company.
The French Canadians.
Yeah.
Even worse.
No, but it's the national state-owned railway company of France.
Yep.
So we are subsidising their state-owned railways.
And we're subsidising
I'm sure their
their
ticket
pension
prices
funds.
are great as well.
Same with the Italian one. Same with the Dutch one. And their ticket prices are great. I looked this up a little while ago.
Oh, yeah.
That's just one example. Again, like, we could talk about the actual, like, giving away of Chagos, giving away of Gibraltar, which apparently is not on the table, blah, blah, blah. Who believes that? But then we can look at the rest of it.
So, I mean, talking about the railway prices, okay, a few weeks ago I actually had to get the train down here where I am. So it's maybe 2.5-hour train journey.
Yeah,
I don't know what that costs in European countries or in America. Here it cost about £160.
Extraordinary sums of money nowadays.
Yeah, £160 for a 2.5-hour train journey.
Staggering, isn't it? But anyway, so that's the general. Okay, where is the British state looking after our interests? Because the British state is responsible for all of this, right? The British state is responsible for giving away various bits of our territory. It's responsible for protecting our borders from illegal immigration and legal immigration, and it's responsible for selling off all of the national assets. And now we've got to the point now where Indians own more properties in London than the English.
Yeah, well, that's
So,
I find stunning.
We are becoming an island not just of strangers, but of renters. And the SNP guy's like, don't know what you're talking about, pal. Don't know, how could you possibly say that the British state isn't looking out for the interests of the British people? I'm the pro-independence SNP guy. It's like, absolutely mad. Absolutely mad.
It is.
So anyway, let's carry on. And so Charlie is just like, well, I don't really agree. I don't really see my own country around at all.
Well, what do you base that assertion that the British state is interested in defending British interests on? Is it the fact that we've had millions of illegal migrants enter the country? Is it the fact that we've had mass immigration for the better part of 30 years that has made it almost impossible for people my age to afford housing, where we feel so dispossessed of our own culture when we walk through our own high streets, we don't see our own country? What else is it? Is it the fact that British identity...
What do you see then?
What do I see?
do you see?
When you're walking down the high street, you say, I don't see my own country. What do you see?
I see a country that has been so poorly governed for really as long as I've been alive, that it has been essentially the inheritance of the country that was built, cultivated by my ancestors, has been given away to anybody who would come here, and the government has been the midwife to that project.
I like that phrase.
You see that as you're walking down the street. You have very strange eyesight, I would say.
How is he wrong?
I hate the selective ignorance from these people. Like, if you take all of the words out of it, the content of what they're actually saying is what?
Yeah.
Huh?
It's literally...
Because they're idiots.
But it's not just that. It's based on one single word: snobbery. Utter snobbery. Because
it is.
It's
There is
snobbery
definite
that's
snobbery.
gone through our history, where the elites have always looked down on our working class people. They've always looked at the hoi polloi as dirty and filthy. We built on the west side of London, so we didn't even have to smell them, to be honest, because the wind blows them away in terms of... And that's exactly what they're doing. When I turn around and say, Ian Dale, what country you're looking at, he's looking at the fact that he goes off to a really beautiful house, sits there with all his friends around nice, lovely restaurants that we could only dream to afford of, most people nowadays. And that's exactly the sort of world he's in. He doesn't see the high streets enclosed because he's in Harrods. He's in all the nice shops. And if he doesn't, he's abroad.
So there's also, like, if you look at the generational difference here, right? Ian Dale, probably about 50, something like that, right? So he's Gen Xer. He's done well.
Great for it.
He's, as you say, at the top of a series of hierarchies. And Charlie is the sort of hungry zoomer at the bottom, saying, look, I don't see my own country. Whatever you think is out there is in your memory.
Yeah.
You know, if I go around and look around, I see Turkish barbers. Yeah. I see the streets flooded with strangers. And
it also suggests that these guys are perfectly comfortable with that. They do just see the country as being an interchangeable economic zone.
Oh, yeah.
So if every high street is a McDonald's and other international outposts, and then a load of foreign-owned shops with nothing recognisably indigenously English in it, that's fine, because to him that is normal.
Yeah,
that's something that he's completely comfortable with, because he never really cared about anything other than base consumption anyway.
It's not even that.
That's a very valid point.
It is that, but it's not just that.
Interesting.
There's a kind of moral consensus that Ian Dale, a conservative, the conservative politician, the New Statesman, and the SNP communist have all agreed on, and that's what's happening at the moment is fine. Yeah. Status quo is the plan. That's what we wanted. And so for Charlie to be like, yeah, but this is awful. Yeah. Absolutely awful. It's really, and he brilliantly articulated there as well. Like, really clear. And I can't help but feel there are people at home listening to this being like, yeah, no, why does it look like this? And so Ian's like, well, what are you seeing? If we can go to the next one.
You've got, was it not Swindon mentioned?
Yes, yeah, sorry. Yeah. And so, like, Ian says here, what are you seeing? And so Charlie's like, okay, well, I'll explain.
Well, I don't know if you've been to a town like Swindon recently, Ian.
Fun enough, what did you think of it? About 2 months ago.
Well, there we go. And what did you think when you were walking down the high street, when you saw the graffiti, the litter, the boarded up shops, and the...
that's austerity.
And you blame that on immigrants, do you?
I don't blame it on immigrants. I blame it on the government, who has permitted this incredibly destructive policy of mass migration, which has...
You do blame it on immigrants.
No, there's a very different... There's a real difference. Let me finish. There is a real difference between blaming immigrants and blaming immigration policy, because I'm blaming the government. Because I think the people who have come here over the last 30 years are just following incentives. Why wouldn't you want to come to Britain? It's the greatest country in the world. It's a land of opportunity, or at least it was. And so, but because of the lax approach of this of the government for the last 30 years, they have essentially sold out that inheritance to all of the world.
Okay, well, we might come on to some of those issues. You might want to ask some questions on those in a few moments' time.
Look at me, feels as though I'm tired. Why do I have to deal with children like this?
He's got no answer.
Because he hasn't got any answer.
He's such an empty-headed dullard.
Yes.
And also there is also the fact, well, you can blame at least some of it on the immigrants. There was the Kenyan meat shop that got shut down for being infested with rats.
Why do we have a dozen Turkish barbers?
Who else's fault is that, Ian? Whose fault is that? Is it the English fault for forcing all of the rats to move it? No, of course it's not, you fool.
But the idea that immigrants are not connected to immigration is a remarkable thing that Ian has achieved here. He is it can't possibly be any single one of their fault by taking advantage of the fact that they can come over to the country and we'll give them loads of free stuff. They're not to blame. It's like, but I mean, I understand why Charlie was like, making that distinction thing, but at the end of the day, they are still agents, right? They are people with moral culpability in the actions they take.
Well, Ian's trying to suggest that what's actually happened isn't that you can blame the individual and cumulative actions of people making their own decisions, but instead to some nebulous abstract force that's in the ether.
It's austerity, but as the SNP.
But he's also trying to open up the door to be able to use the great phrases of racism.
Yeah, you can see where he was going.
You could see exactly where his door was. I've seen this with Ian before. He's tried it on the show with me before about it when I talk about exactly the same sort of things. These type of individuals just only get the opportunity for what they think is a gotcha moment by saying, you've turned around immigration. It's the individual. And I could turn around that quite clearly and say, I've got great, mixed race, great family, great people who've got...
Yeah, but we're not defending... No, we're not defending ourselves.
Exactly.
Not defending ourselves.
In terms of that. But I then always point out to, what about those who commit crime? How many times have you actually criticised them when they've come over here as foreigners? And I turn it back onto them because they refuse to accept that immigration can have any negative impacts whatsoever. And it's incumbent upon us to remind them that it does as well, each time.
And so they move on throughout the rest of the conversation. It's an hour long. He talks about why reform polling so well, but Charlie does a really great job. For the sake of time, I'll skip that one. And they get to the failure of Brexit, which is a really interesting part.
I think that what Brexit actually was an expression of, total dissatisfaction with the liberal world order and a desire on the part of the public to break with that completely. But that's not what's happened. Actually, what's happened is we have gone even further into that kind of liberal vision of Britain, and it's been just disastrous.
It's all feeling very 2018, isn't it?
What do you mean by liberal vision of Britain?
Well, once again, one where our borders are open, one where we are told that anybody can become British if they just buy into British values, one where our economy is, sort of systematically deindustrialised, where it's impossible for young people to buy a house and so on.
Those are policy issues.
Steve.
Thanks, Ian. Much of that's just policy issues that a government could sort. It's not part of a wider globalist agenda or anything.
These policies are not part of a wider globalist agenda. But of course they are.
Purely nonsense.
The policies are how the agenda is put into action.
Yeah.
So to be like, those things that you don't like, they're just policies, bro. I know.
Out of a hat.
Yeah, but exactly.
Completely
They're not
random.
part of a wider globalist agenda or anything. Boris Johnson didn't advertise it as global Britain and then crank open the sluice gates so millions
We wrote down a
could
load
come
of
here.
silly policies and put them on a dartboard.
Yeah.
That's how we chose them.
It's completely unconnected to the wider globalist agenda, I'll have you know. It's just coincidence that it perfectly aligns with the wider globalist agenda.
World Economic Forum policy show. Here
Yeah.
we are today. Boris is going to open up the doors.
And again,
It's just policy, bro.
the fact that Ian Dale's like, what international liberal order? And it's like, you don't see the water you swim in, right? This is literally...
Or he's just lying.
Well, I'm going to assume that he's ignorant for his own... the sake of my judgment of his character.
Because Ian Dale, it makes you seem better to be stupid rather than lying.
It's true, Ian. The idea that Ian's like, I don't understand what you mean by international liberal order. Okay, well, that's fascinating.
Considering lots of books are written about it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, put all that aside. But that's a fascinating way of revealing why you, the Conservative, agree with the SNP communist, right? You're all just swimming around in the international liberal order. And then you've got a young man like Charlie Downs who comes out and goes, wow, all of this is the problem. And Ian's just like, I don't know what you mean. I thought the guardrails have been prescribed for me some time in the past, and I just can't think beyond it. And it just shows the paucity of the mainstream discussion on any of this, which is why Charlie just curb stomps the lot of them.
Be interesting to see whether Bite Back Books, which is what he owns, Ian Dale, actually has any book whatsoever on the liberal order.
It would be.
If any of our guests, kind of audience, want to pick that out and we can send it to him.
Bite Back Publishing, is that it?
Yeah, it's Bite Back Publishing,
Right.
I think.
I'll take a quick look as we're going along.
We'll go to the next one because this is the final one, because you can see at this point that they're desperately saying, well, I mean, I don't know what you mean by liberal order. This is just policy. I mean, there's never a moral incentive behind policy or anything. And Charlie just gets them to the point where they essentially have nothing they can say to him.
I think that the purpose of a system is what it does. And the purpose of our justice system, based on that principle, is to protect people like Mike Amesbury and punish people like Lucy Connolly.
Run that by me again. Protect people like Mike Amesbury.
Yes, it leads people.
He was the MP that was in Runcorn who punished a constituent.
Yes.
How did the justice system protect him?
Well, because as we've just heard, he received a 10-week suspended sentence for assaulting a constituent, whereas Lucy Connolly posted a tweet and got 31 months.
But she was calling for asylum hotels to be burnt down.
Yes, and as I've already said, she does deserve to be punished for that because it's incitement. But again, it's just, I mean, which is the more severe of the two crimes? I would say it's Mike Amesbury.
Right, let's move on to another subject.
No answer.
There's no answer again.
Isn't that so beautifully played out though?
Yeah.
Well, the system is designed to protect the Labour MP who beats up a constituent and punish a woman who's distressed about a terrorist attack. And he's like, well, how do you think that it does that? Because it didn't send him to jail.
Yeah.
It didn't, but it sent her to jail. It's so straightforward. It's so obvious.
It is not obvious. It's very clear.
But Ian just cannot question the system itself.
No.
I'm embedded in this. I can't even stand to talk about this. And you saw the SNP guy just like this. It's like, my God, these people are just mentally
It's also performative. Because what it's not again supposed to be answering any of these questions or addressing them. It's just to signal to viewers who are not yet off the reservation that you're not even supposed to don't even question this. This is all just so far below us.
See, I think you're giving them too much credit, right? I think you're giving them way more credit than they deserve.
Are you hoping he was actually just weeping silently?
No. He wasn't weeping.
I hope he was. I hope he was like crying.
No. Because I don't think they're as cynical as you think they are, right? I think they're genuinely, because I was a liberal once. They have blinders on. They have like mist in front of their eyes.
No. I think you can be sincere in this whilst also being performative in the way that you're showing yourself.
Sure, but I think that they genuinely don't know where to go with any of these critiques. I think they genuinely have nothing to
I think you've got a very important point on there, because a few days before this, we saw, was it Jenny Green, the now lady or lord, wherever they call her, Jenny Green in the House of Lords, discussing they called it the attack by Rupert Lowe on the credibility of Nigel Farage being able to achieve anything in power. And her words were to everybody else, and all like nodding dogs, they agreed with it, is that I just cannot understand what's into the heads of people who vote reform. I've tried to understand where they get their concerns from and what is actually driving them. And I just thought to myself, do you know what? Perhaps if we take you out of your lovely house and shove you in this 2 up, 2 down, which is surrounded by people throwing boxes in the streets, hearing the sounds.
You live in Birmingham.
You can live there. Why don't you live there on the amounts of money that these people have to live for a year? Then you wouldn't even last a year. You wouldn't even last a month.
Oh, also on Ian Dale's publishing company, if it's Bite Back Publishing,
yes.
They've got plenty of books on politics. They've got one called The End of America, Post-World Disorder, the New World Disorder, stuff like that. They published Liz Truss' book, 10 Years to Save the West. They've got a number of biographies of people like Margaret Thatcher. So you would expect that the liberal world order, or at least the framework of it, would be discussed plenty in these kinds of books.
We'll take those links and we'll send them.
Yeah, maybe you should buy this, Ian. But yeah, so anyway, I just thought Charlie did a superb job of not only presenting the right-wing position in this hostile environment, but also rendering them speechless and unable to engage with anything that he's saying. That shows that there is.
If they'll invite him back.
Well, they won't invite him back, I'm sure. But what it shows us is that there's real teeth to the right-wing critique, and the establishment have no answers for it because they themselves are the problem. We've been complaining about what appears to be the intentional degradation of our educational system for years now. If you went through the state school system in the UK, as I did, you will know exactly what I mean. Just listen to the man in the street interviews from the 1960s compared to those done now, and it is crystal clear that those people then have something that we don't have now. Put simply, we're being dumbed down by the powers that be on purpose, but we don't have to accept this perpetual lowering of standards. We are still a free people, and it's time to do something about it. This is why we have created courses.lotuseaters.com, a platform on which we are now offering courses which are tailor-made to reconstruct the education that has been denied to us. The first course we have available is Dr. Nima Parvini's excellent Trivium, a tripartite course consisting of logic, grammar, and rhetoric, which is the foundation and backbone of a classical education. This course will make you a better writer, speaker, and thinker, and it used to be that every 12-year-old in the country would take it. Personally, I will be doing this course with my own children to ensure they get the benefits of it for their whole lives, but it's never too late to do it, and I really think you should. We will also be producing many other courses in the future on subjects which are not topics of idle interest, but which instead will level you up as a person and make you more effective in the real world. I want to be clear, these are not YouTube videos. They are university-level lectures and coursework with a test at the end to which you will have to apply yourself. In these, we are not offering you an easy life. We are offering you the foundations of what you will need to be a part of the ascent of our civilization out of the hole that was dug for us. They are not easy, but they are rewarding. They are an investment in yourself that will provide you with skills that you will use for the rest of your life. Courses.lotuseaters.com. We will see you there.